We're recording. If you don't know, I do have to. The audience, they need me to clap. It's a thing now. I've been doing it for almost 1,700 episodes, so they're into it now. What's going on? Are you there? Are you
Yeah.
frozen?
No, I'm here.
You sit so still that every time I think you're frozen.
I'm old and my joints don't work that great.
Well, guys, I have hospice nurse Penny here. Penny, who was actually the reason that I found you, actually, was because of Chad Wright. I don't know if you know who Chad Wright is. He is an ex-Navy SEAL. He brought you up on Joe Rogan's podcast, and I was doing research for an episode because they were talking about you and the fact that he kind of filled in as a hospice nurse for his friend. He was there as he passed, and yeah, they briefly mentioned you. And then I looked into you and I went down the rabbit hole, and I was like, this is someone that I should definitely talk to.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I was surprised when I heard that I was mentioned on that podcast and I looked for Chad Wright, and I said, hey, thanks for shouting me out on Joe Rogan, even though you said I was a little crazy, LOL. And then he responded and said, no, I meant crazy in a good way. Like you're so joyful and fun, and I really like watching you. And I should have expanded on that on the show. But so I thought that was really nice. I hadn't taken offense to it anyways, but yeah, it was a surprise that I was mentioned on that show.
Yeah, isn't that wild? That was something that I'm like, oh yeah, I'm like I should kind of mention that because like that's a pretty big thing. But hospice nurse, this is a very interesting topic. Now, obviously, we're gonna bounce around a little bit because you do have your book. If you guys can't tell, the title is behind her right there, Influencing Death. I do want to touch on the book a little bit, but my morning was filled with surprise because as I'm listening to the book, thinking that we're just going to jump into this conversation from a hospice nurse, you're basically the start of your book. You're basically a sailor. You're you're hanging out with sailors all the time. You guys are partying into the wee hours all the time. I was like, oh, this is not what I was expecting. But yeah, it's halfway through the book, and then all of a sudden it's like a hospice nurse is born, and I'm like, oh, okay, now we're going to talk about that. Very interesting stuff. So
I come from humble beginnings, you could say.
I would say wild beginnings. Very
Yeah,
wild.
beginnings. That's probably more appropriate. Yeah. I like to dispel the myth right out of the gate that hospice nurses are angels. We hear that all the time, and we're just people. And I also really want to keep it real, on my social media and in my book. I think it's really important to be truthful about who I am. That includes my past, because I'm talking about a subject that can be very intimidating and scary to people. And I want them to trust me when I say, you have nothing to fear. Death is normal. It happens to all of us.
Mhm.
And it is possible to have a good death experience.
Yeah, yeah. I've recently just through you get these unexpected educations as you do podcast as you're a YouTuber, and I make videos every day. So there's this weird education that comes along with it. And recently I've been more opened up to the idea that death is instead of something to be feared a little, it's something more to be revered, but also not to be like so panicked about. So I'm starting to come around. Whereas before, for me, it's been a very paralyzing subject. I've had people in my life die, but I've never been around them when it's happened. So it's a harder topic for me because it's hard to confront. I'm sure you see this with many people. It's hard to confront your own mortality, really.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, it really, it can be a very sacred experience.
Mm.
And the alternative is that it's a terrible experience and you have regret. And if you're the person dying, fear. If you're the family, regret, guilt. So, trying to get to a place of acceptance that it's going to happen will help you to potentially overcome or even avoid those obstacles to it being a sacred death. And just so you know, you are not alone in your fear or anxiety. Death anxiety is extremely common. I had it myself.
Mhm.
I had it cripplingly. Is that a word? Cripplingly. I was crippled by death anxiety. I would cry at night. I was so fearful of death and what happens after we die? What if it's nothing? It really worried me a lot. And it is one of the many reasons why I became a hospice nurse was because I thought, well, maybe immersing myself in death will help me to overcome that anxiety. I had no experience with being around dead or dying people up until the point when I became a hospice nurse. And then when I got on social media, that's really when I found out that it's super common for people to be really anxious and afraid of death. But the good news is it doesn't have to be that way. Like you don't
Yeah.
have to have that. And I used to think it was because of my work in hospice that I overcame that until I found that many of the people who follow me on social media were saying, I don't feel afraid of death anymore since I started watching your videos. And came to the conclusion that it's about acceptance, getting to that place where you can be like, yeah, it's going to happen. I can't control it and I'm not going to think about it. I'm just going to put it behind me and not let it have power. I'm going to take the power away from it and instead focus on living my life. And it does help you to live your life more fully if you can let go of worrying about the end of your life. If you're perseverating on your death, it's hard to really enjoy life.
Yeah, yeah, very true. That I guess, yeah, that would be the best instruction that you could give somebody is to live it fully and not have those regrets. I mean, I think about regrets I have now and I still have a full life to live, I hope. And yeah, I could only imagine what it's like when you're at the door, about to take that journey, how that must feel, you know?
Yeah. And it's different for everyone. I think in my experience, when people or go on to hospice at first they're often terrified, like, oh boy, I'm for real going to die now, doctor said, that's why I qualify for hospice. And then once they kind of settle into that idea, they aren't afraid anymore. I've had a few patients who were afraid of dying, but most people, or of death, but most people, if they express any fear at all, it's about what does that dying look like for them? Is it going to be painful? Will they be uncomfortable? And how is their family going to be? That's a
Mhm.
biggie. People really worry about the survivors. How are they going to be after I'm gone? And both of those things, we can address in hospice because we have excellent um, symptom management skills and tools that we can use to help with those symptoms and alleviate the suffering most of the time. And as far as the family is concerned, we offer grief support services up until, or after the person dies for like a year. It's required for us to do that. And I've had so many patients who they were worried about how their family would be. And when I said, well, we have grief support services, so we're going to be following them and we're going to be providing them support. And they were like, oh, that's great. It really alleviated that worry for them.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. The symptoms, like managing that type of thing. What does that look like? Are you even allowed to like talk about that? Or is that only
Oh,
something
yeah.
for
No,
the
sure. I can talk
clients?
about it.
Yeah.
So, first of all, dying itself is not painful. Our bodies know how to die. Our biologically, our bodies know how to die. But certain disease processes can cause pain or suffering, uh, especially cancer. Different kinds of cancer can cause pain, shortness of breath, any kind of lung disease, especially like COPD, can cause shortness of breath. People can be nauseated. Those types of symptoms, are kind of par for the course if you have cancer. And we have all kinds of medications that we can use for that. Of course, our frontline treatment options are usually going to be opioids. Morphine is the number one thing that we like to use because it's cheap, it works fast, it's proven, it's safe. It doesn't take a lot for it to work. And we use, benzodiazepines, which are your Valium, Ativan family of drugs. Those work really well. Anxiety is something that we treat. a lot. People do get anxious, especially if they're short of breath. And one of the symptoms that we often, I wouldn't say often see, but we see sometimes is terminal agitation. And that is usually something that is caused by existential suffering. So that's for people who really aren't okay with dying. Oftentimes they're young or they have young kids and they get so agitated at the end of life, and it's they're not able to express what's going on. They're just truly out of it, confused, agitated, getting up, getting down. And we can't say, hey, what's going on with you? We assess for things, physical things, to see if it's driven by pain, or do they need to poop, or do they need to pee. So we assess for those things. And if it's not those things, then we usually go, yep, it's terminal agitation. It means that they're close to the end of their life. And we do try to control it with, minimally with or minimal use of sedating medications or antipsychotics like haloperidol. But most of the time, in my experience, we end up sedating them until their death. So it's called palliative sedation. And we give them a sedating medication that basically just puts them to sleep until they die. Not
So
causing their death. Let me just clarify.
yeah, of
Not
course.
causing their death, but making them sleep until their death occurs.
Like when it comes to that, I was gonna ask you if you yourself have had to deal with anybody that really didn't want to go. And I guess you gave me the answer in terms of what you guys do, but have you ever had that experience?
Yeah. So I had a patient, and this is in my book. You probably haven't got this far yet. He was a young man. He was in his early 40s, and he had lung cancer.
Warren?
Pardon me?
Was it Warren?
Maybe. I make names up for my patients so that I'm not giving any.
I think I'm just there.
I
think I was just reading that part. Okay.
It might have been Warren. It could have been, but he was a young man, and he had lung disease, and he was really scared, but couldn't say to us, I'm scared. We could just tell, like he was just not wanting to relax, and I had given him medication and he just wasn't calming down. And I stood at the bedside with him, and the aide stood at the other side of the bed, and we each held his hand, and he looked up at the ceiling, and all of a sudden peace just washed over his face, and he died. I mean, it was just like palpable. Like you could see, it was like, oh, he just and relaxed and just died. And I looked at her and I said, have you ever seen anything like that? And she said, no. Have you? And I said, no. I never have. I never had seen that, and I've never seen it since. But it was definitely this feeling of, at the very end, he had peace before his death. And really, I can honestly say everybody I've ever seen die has died peacefully. And sometimes, and when I say that, I mean at the end, their death. But getting there isn't always a peaceful process. Like when we do have terminal agitation, that is not always peaceful, but we get them to a place of being calm and peaceful with the medications that we give. But in his case, the medication, he was just so close to the end of life, and I had just given him the drugs and was kind of waiting to see, should I go get more, that type of thing, and he just up.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that was an interesting story. That was the story that I just
so that was Warren. Yeah.
And that was something that you were calling, or maybe it was just, in conversation of the book, it was just called the death stare. Is that like a known thing that happens a lot? Or
yeah,
I know that situation doesn't happen a lot, but the death stare itself.
Yeah, the death stare is really something normal, where at the end of life, people like it's like the lights are on, but nobody's home. Like they're not focusing on anything anymore. And I opened the book with a story about a woman who her daughter was a nun, and she had all kinds of nun visitors coming to see her. And in the evening when I was working, I was at the nurse's station, and the last visitor came out. She was a nun, and she said, she's gone. And I said, oh, and I stood up and grabbed my stethoscope, and she said, no. Her body is here still doing the work of dying, but her spirit has left. You can see it in her eyes. And I was new, like I was really new in the field, and uh, crept into the room to see what the heck she was talking about. And I could clearly see what she meant. Like you could really tell that she was just not in there anymore. She had left. Her body was still like doing the mechanics of the dying process, but there was no sign of like life left in her. And since then, I've seen it time and time again. It's really, really common to see that in someone where they just have that stare. They're just not in there anymore.
And is that something that's happening right before they pass, or could that be days before or happen and last for an hour or something like that?
Yeah. So when a person is imminently dying, meaning they're in that we call actively dying stage. So they are dying, they're at the point of no return. That's when it's happening, but it can be minutes, hours, or days. People can be actively dying for a long period of time. Sometimes people really linger in that stage. So it just, can go on for a while. I've had patients that actively died for a week, which is not common, but I've seen it happen where I had one patient who was actively dying for 3 weeks. He had no food, no liquids for 3 whole weeks. The family was like, what is going on here? Completely unresponsive, not in there, body just doing the work of the dying. And it took a whole 3 weeks before he finally died. That was definitely an anomaly. I've never seen anybody live that long without food or fluids,
You
or
know what
food
it
and
remind
fluids.
you know what it reminds me of? I'm a very I'm a very out there person. You can say, I always tell my fans to put on their tinfoil speedos before I start a video because it's gonna get real out there, you know. But what that reminds me, just to prepare you for like things that I say or bring up, but it almost reminds me of like a spiritual birth because I have a child. They're just past like 1.5, but I remember clearly because it just happened not long ago. My wife in labor, and what a experience that is to be around. She actually, because I heard in the book how your labor was, she had the exact same type of labor.
Oh,
It was
wow.
a long thing, and then there was an emergency, and then we had to do what we had to do. But yeah, she was in it for a long time, and it was very much like as you're describing people passing away, it's like that same. It's almost like they are. I could say shedding this body, or it's almost like they're giving birth, giving a rebirth to their spirit and letting that spirit go, kind of thing.
Yeah. So a lot of people will refer to the dying process as laboring out of life. They'll say they're
Oh,
laboring out of life. And I don't know why I don't grasp onto that terminology, because I do, you know, ascribe to the belief that the dying is like birth. It is like
mhm,
we have transition. When a person's dying, they're transitioning in birth. The mother will transition during the birthing process. It takes as long as it takes. You don't know how long that's going to be. Same in birth, same in death. um,
mhm.
I don't know why I don't like laboring. Maybe it's because labor sounds like work and work sucks. So I
Well,
don't
yeah,
know,
I
but
mean, like for the people, like when you read the book, I mean, you were saying 36 hours in labor you were about.
I was in labor, yeah, for my son. For my daughter, I was in labor literally for 5 days because I had a serial induction. So they were putting me on Pitocin at 6 a.m. and turning it off at 10 p.m. So I labored for 5 long days with my daughter. So maybe
Wild.
that is why I don't like laboring, because
Yeah.
I don't know. I hear lots of people talk, death doulas, especially. I hear them talk about, you know, laboring out of life. And I
Mhm.
always think, well, I don't want it when I'm dying. I don't want it to be like work. I don't want it to be labor. I want it to be easy and peaceful and calm,
Yeah.
and all the things as I'm
Yeah.
waiting to move on to whatever's after this world.
Yeah. Yeah. I think people like you make it easy on this side, and I think there's a um just I think there's a difficulty as they're transitioning to the other side, and maybe that's the laboring as they're coming through, and who knows what they're seeing on the other side. Maybe it's the same type of, maybe it's almost like a same similar type of setup, like, okay, here he comes, guys. Remember, he's not going to remember anything. He's going to be really disheveled. He might get violent. Everybody just prepare. He's coming through. you know?
I wonder, I mean, because and I definitely believe in an afterlife. I didn't before I became a hospice nurse. I had no concept of afterlife. I wasn't raised with religion, didn't believe in heaven or hell, still don't. But I do believe in an afterlife. And I mean, people have deathbed visions where they see their deceased loved ones and even sometimes pets. We observe this in dying people. It's in our literature. It's a sign that a person is getting close to the end of their life. And people can have these visions weeks before their death when they are coherent and able to say to you, my dad's in the kitchen. I see my mom right up there. And, so I don't know. It seems to me like that's preparing them for what's coming next, so maybe they're not disheveled and confused when they get there. Maybe they, although, during this, what we call transition, which is before they're actively dying, this transition period, they are often, and this when they're seeing these visions, they're often confused, and it's almost like they're here sometimes and then they're somewhere else and we don't exactly know where they are, but they are disoriented during that transition phase. So I think once maybe they get to actively dying, it's all good, like
Hmm.
they've worked through it, but they can be confused, and sometimes the visions that they see are figures they don't recognize at first, or dark shadows, that type of thing. And never something that causes fear in them, brings comfort to them. But sometimes it's like, oh, they'll talk about where they were. In fact, oh, I've got the greatest story. This did not make it into my book. There's like, after I wrote the book, I was like, oh, I forgot about that story. But I had a patient who I only was able to see her for a couple days because I was working on the weekend. So when we work on the weekend, we're floating basically to go see patients who need us to see them. As a case manager during the week, I see my patients. And then whenever on the weekend I worked, then I would be floating to see patients who were just in need of nursing visits. So she had been admitted on a Friday, and I went to meet her on Saturday, and she had just come home from the hospital the day before, was still in her hospital gown. I had all kinds of things I had to do with her to get her daughter was taking care of her. They just got the hospital bed. I was putting in a catheter, getting her changed, cleaning her up, all these things, and really got to know the daughter very well. And then went and saw her again on Sunday. And I could tell that my patient was not long for this world. I knew that she was probably going to be dying pretty quickly. And so I'm telling the daughter, like, I'm telling her all these things. This is what we can expect. I don't think she's going to live long. Here's how you can care for her. Well, she died on Monday. And because I had worked on the weekend, I didn't work Monday. I worked Tuesday. And the daughter called me on Tuesday and she said, I have to tell you what happened with my mom. She said that her mom was describing that these windows in front of her. She was holding up her hands and she was describing windows of time in her life, like she was doing a life review, like, oh, there's this time, and talking about these times in her life. And then she held up her hands and she said to her daughter, am I going to need these? And her
Wow.
daughter said, your hands? And she said, yeah. And she said, I don't know, Mom. And she said, am I going to need this? And she started motioning towards her chest. And her
Hmm.
daughter said, your gown? And she said, no, this. And then her daughter realized she was talking about her body, her
Yeah.
skin. And I was just like, oh, chills. Like, that was so cool. Like, that was really cool because she was just so articulate about what she was experiencing. And I believe that when somebody is dying, they are going through, life review. They're processing things that happened in their life, and they're reviewing things that happened in their life. And that's why they kind of are. And they have one leg in this world and one leg in another. And that's why they do get confused during that transition period. And we always say you need to reorient them to who you are, even if that's your spouse or your child or your mom or your dad. You say, hi, Mom, it's me, Penny, your daughter. I'm going to turn you now, because they can be so confused about what's going on. And we, want to provide that calm reassurance for them.
Wow. Oh man, what a thing the mind is, the spirits. all of that, for somebody to be seeing these windows of time. And it's very interesting that she's describing it like that because, you know, time, we feel like it's very linear, like it's a filing cabinet that you pull open, but in reality, it's kind of all around you. It's not as linear as we think it is. So it's very
No, and
interesting.
it's almost conceptual too, like
Mm.
because I know, like I've been talking about this a lot lately. The older I get, the faster time goes. My husband said the other day, if I live to be 70, I have 3 more summers left. And I was like, I am not going to go there with trying to do the math on how many summers I have left if I live to such and such a time. But, it really is, it's not something you can touch. It's not tangible. It just exists. And the older we get, it seems like the faster it goes. I think because we have more time behind us and less time in front of us. But and I also feel like, and another reason why I think possibly that people are doing life review when they're dying is because that is what I do as I get older. I am remembering things from my past more and more, or thinking about them, and sometimes even thinking, I wish that I could go through that time again, especially if it was a time that I maybe didn't appreciate during that time. But afterwards, I go, it was like the worst of times, the best of times. I kind of wish I could go back to that. So maybe reliving that when we're dying is, something that we do.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that would make sense. I've been doing a lot of that since we had our first child. I've been doing a lot more of that. And it wasn't just because of my own life or mortality, but it was more because everybody who's a mother, father, they're like, they only stay like this for so long. It's gone so quickly. You never get it back. And it really gets into perspective, like, oh yeah, like this is like, there's like, my wife even said it, like our daughter, she would call flowers sowies. She would say
Mhm.
sowies. And now she says flowies. And my wife's like, she's never gonna say sowies again. Like that's
I
over.
know.
And
It's like
it's
when they call you mommy when they're little, and then one day they call you mom, and it's so
yeah,
cute that they're calling you mom now. But then you look back. I was watching videos with my daughter. She came to visit me. She lives in another state, and we were watching home movies, and she was calling me mom in the video, and she was like 2 years old. And I'm like, oh, I remember when you were so little and you
yeah,
transferred from mommy to mom. And it's like, oh, yeah, you never get
yeah.
that again.
Yeah, and then it's just gone. So I've been very appreciative of the time, all the hugs, because it's like I always think about it like when I'm hugging her and I'm like holding her up because she's small, and how one day it's gonna be like her feet are on the ground and she might even be my height, and like like it's just, it changes. So it's like you got to get real, and it helps me realize that you need to do that with all parts of life. It's not just the kids, but you have to start doing that with all parts of your life. You have to really enjoy these times.
And that is what embracing death will do for you, by the
Mm.
way. That is what
Yeah.
accepting death will do for you. It will help you to really appreciate the small things in life. And I always say, I'm human, so I still get pissed if a spoon is stuck in the drawer and I can't get it open, that type of thing. I sweat the small things sometimes, but really, I'm much better about appreciating, like taking a moment to appreciate a beautiful sunset, or not waiting to go on a trip. My sister and brother and I decided to go on a cruise. It was probably about 10 years ago. We're like, we're going to go on the cruise of a lifetime. We're going to go to Alaska. My sister's husband and my husband were not into cruising. My brother's not married. So the three of us are going to go on a cruise of a lifetime. We're going to go to Alaska. And we really did it up. We got a suite, with a balcony, and it was great, awesome package that we got. It was a fantastic cruise. We came back home and we were all like, this was not going to be the cruise of a lifetime. This is going to be the cruise that we do every other year, because life is
Mm.
short and you got to do things that really bring you joy. And so since then, we have gone on a cruise every other year. So, it's just
That's
really important to do what brings you joy.
Yeah, yeah. Leaving back regrets is definitely not the thing you want. Looking back, that's why for me, like I want to take my wife. We want to go live in Italy for like maybe a year, something like that. We've been in Texas for the longest time. We love Texas. We actually like to travel all around south and up east, and we want to go west as well. But also, I've never been to Europe. I've never put my feet down in that place, so I want to take us all there, especially while we can, before the kid gets cemented in the things and the friends and everything. Like I want to give her that experience, so
But you
it's
have to wait till she's old enough to remember it. That was my rule about Disney. I was not willing to take my kids to Disneyland until they were at least 5 years old, so they could actually remember it. My youngest daughter was born on Okinawa, Japan, which was an amazing experience, but she didn't get to experience it because she was 2.5 when we left there, or 3, so she doesn't even remember anything about it. But
wow.
you want to wait till they're like, you got to get them right in that right age range, so that
Well,
they can remember.
for now, it's my wife that I want to have the experience. I want her to have that experience of, going
Yeah.
there and seeing that stuff and eating the food, because we're both like gluten intolerant here. But apparently when you go to Europe, all of a sudden it goes away, because they have magical grain that's not covered in
they have grain that
glyphosate,
hasn't been stepped on a million times and mass produced. And
yeah, exactly. So we want to experience some stuff like that, but it's just like, yeah, you got to do those things while you can. It's interesting, you're talking about the death stare. I guess I'll just jump over to the other questions I had, because the thing that was mentioned on Joe Rogan's podcast that Chad was talking about was the death reach.
Yeah.
And if for anybody that doesn't know, I guess I should let you explain better than I'll be able to explain. But what is the death reach, and how many times have you seen it?
Oh, I've seen it hundreds of times, more than hundreds of times. I mean, I've took care of patients for years and years and cared for thousands of dying people. And I worked in hospice care centers for 7 years. So that's where you're like taking care of people who are there at the end of their lives. So I've seen it just more times than I can count. But basically it's, when people are close to the end of their life, and they're transitioning. So they're in that kind of like, I'm kind of not able to communicate with you, confused stage, and they're reaching into the air. They're just reaching into the air. And sometimes they do things like pick at their clothes, or they do things like, this is why I think people do life review at the end. If they smoked, they smoke. I've had lots of patients who did this, and I'd say to the family, what is he doing? Oh, he was a fly fisherman. He's tying flies. Needle point, like this type of thing, or like this, picking at their clothes, which now I, have realized, since I had the patient who said, do I need this? She's trying to shed her skin. That might be what this clothes picking is. But the most common thing is the reach. And because people often vision those deceased loved ones up above them or in the corner of the room, and that's where they're usually reaching, I really think they're reaching for these people or animals that they see.
Yeah.
They just, it's real common. I mean, I've got videos. In fact, I believe the video that they showed on Joe Rogan was first a clip of somebody doing a reach and then me talking about it possibly. And I've got pictures and video clips from all kinds of people who have sent them to me or posted them online. It's so common that people do that. And when they do that, we know, that they're close to the end. They're very close to the end.
Yeah, you did. It was that video. I made sure to show the audience, like I went and found your account and everything and actually showed that video. And yeah, it's something. I mean, Chad's experience was very interesting, because he said his friend, I think he said his left side was paralyzed. So he couldn't really do anything with that left side. And then when the death reach came, and then that, in Chad's story, that was the last thing that he did. He reached up and laid back, and then that was it. He was gone.
And I want to tell you, and I love that story. It's beautiful, but that is not very common that people will just die like that. Sometimes they do, but usually we see this dying process. And that actually sounds more like he was going through the dying process and doing the reaching and dying, but almost always they're settled down and then they're going to die. But, people talk about famous last words, like what were the last words that they said? How profound were they? Like Steve Jobs said, uh, oh wow, oh
Oh
wow
wow.
at
Oh
the
wow.
at
Oh
the
wow.
end.
Oh wow.
And so
Yeah.
then people get this idea that everybody's going to have these profound last words and then they're going to shut their eyes and die like they do on TV, and they don't usually. You almost will never know what the last words of your person was unless you're writing down everything that they say until they die.
Mhm.
Because people usually go into this dying process and then they die. Although I could see that, like with what he's talking about, the reach and then dying is totally possible
Yeah.
to happen. But it
Yeah.
doesn't happen very often, is what I'm trying to say. What he
Ye
saw was something that was extremely special to be able to see that, because it just doesn't usually happen that way.
Yeah, it sounds really wild. I mean, and I don't doubt it because from the story, like when you hear the whole episode, he talks about being with this guy for a long time and he's reading to him and he's like, it seems like they're going through, like you're saying, this whole process. And then that seems to be one of his last acts. And yeah, I do think you're right. I think they are reaching up to those people. When I did this episode, when I was talking about just this whole phenomenon there, um, I was saying to them, like you said in the video, you were talking about people doing this and the fishing, and I was like, I wonder if the veil is so thin because us here today, if I say I'm gonna grab a pen, I grab a pen, and that's what I need, and that's what you need for me to see the pen. But maybe they're in a state where it's like, well, if I want to smoke, I can just smoke. Like
Mm-hmm.
all this heavy nonsense that you guys go through, that's just you don't need that. Like if I want to smoke, it's right here. I can just do
Yeah.
that. Like maybe they're just tuned into that part of their consciousness because they're letting go of all the earthly things. They're starting to realize how unnecessary they are. Going back to that patient who's like, do I need this? Like, what do I need this for?
Yeah. I definitely love the idea that the veil is getting thin. I really believe that's what's happening. And I think so. Like I'm out here too, man. So just so you know, I'll go out here with you on the limb and talk about the strange things. But I think that people, when they're close to the end of the life, that veil thins out for them. But also it happens with children. My youngest daughter had an invisible friend that she called Lindsay. And
Wow.
Lindsay was this big and she dressed all in pink. And we would have to watch out where we sat, because if we didn't, we might sit on Lindsay. And then one day I realized that she had not talked about Lindsay for a long time. And I asked her what happened to Lindsay. And she said she was hit by a car. And I was like, oh, okay. And so as an adult, like I'm processing all these things as I become a nurse and I'm experiencing death and the dying process through the eyes of my patients, and asking her, like, what do you think about Lindsay? Oh, I don't really remember much about her. Now my daughter's almost 30 years old. Oh, I don't remember much about her. I just remember that I killed her off. And I said, I wonder though, was she real? Like, was she a real
Yeah.
apparition? And here's another funny thing. So I'm working in hospice for all these years, seeing people deathbed vision. No doubt in my mind that they see what they say they're seeing, that they're there in the room. Like if you see somebody doing this, it's undeniable that there's something in the room. Like you start to think, okay, there must be something wrong with me that I can't see what they're seeing, because they are so convincing that there's someone in the room. So I
Yeah.
completely believe that they are seeing the spirits of somebody who has died. And I never gave a whole lot of thought to psychic mediums, but I was on TikTok, and John Edward, psychic medium John Edward, I don't know if you know who he is. He's a
I
very,
do.
very famous psychic medium. He had his own show in the 90s, and he was doing a live, and he invited me to get into the live with him. And at that moment, I had like this epiphany of, well, of course, if I believe that people who are dying can see deceased spirits, it makes sense to me that there are some people who are living who have that same ability, who are clairvoyant and can see. And maybe it has to do with being willing to see it. I don't know. But I do think, all that to say is I do think there is some kind of other worldly thing happening. And some people are privy to that. And I think we all are when we're dying. If we die a natural death, not if we die suddenly. I don't know. And possibly, like when we're kids too, we're open to that.
Yeah, yeah, I 100% believe that. I've always had nieces and nephews. I have a bunch of nieces and nephews and godchildren and whatnot. But having your own kid, you really click into the fact that they are seeing some stuff that you are not seeing. My my daughter would always do it. I'd be like, it would be like nighttime, and she would just be like a little baby, and she'd be like looking over my shoulder and like looking like up and down. I'd be like, "Oh, you're giving me the chills right now. What are you looking at? What are you doing this for? Why are you doing this for? Just go to sleep. Go to sleep." But yeah, she was constantly doing that, and it just makes you wonder. Like their vision spectrum is different. They've just crossed into this new life, and where they were before. Yeah, I am in the belief of where they were before is where you go when you pass. So they could easily still be seeing things. I mean, the same way that you're pretty much talking about integration when you're helping your clients. You're integrating them into this experience. You're doing the same thing for their family. You're getting everybody, you're clicking everybody into how this is going to go and what's happening. You're trying to make it as peaceful as possible. Who's to say that when a kid is born that there are not those type of entities making sure that they're all right? Like
Yeah.
you've chosen this. This is where you're supposed to be. Yes, you're a baby. No, this is not weird. Yes, you are much smaller than these people. They're not giants. You're just a little baby. Don't worry about it. Like, who's to say that somebody's not helping them integrate into this life? And then eventually they're okay and they kind of click in and they go, okay, this is where I am. This is who I am now. Who's
Kind of
to say,
like,
really?
I love the movie What Dreams May Come.
Oh, I've never seen
Have you
that. What's that
seen
about?
that? Oh,
No.
you have to watch it. Robin Williams. Oh, it's so good. I mean, it really talks about reincarnation in a way where we die and then, we choose when we want to come back. And I really like that idea. Not necessarily do we choose how we want to come back, but we get to, like, I think the idea that we have to attain a certain level of spiritual awareness or, you know, just high spirituality or,
Yeah.
and we just have to keep coming back until we get it right. Like, how they say somebody's like an old soul, like a child can be an old soul,
Mhm.
that type of thing, where we just keep kind of having to come back and do it again. And, speaking of children, so my daughter, the one who I think, was clairvoyant and had her little friend Lindsay, when she was a newborn, she would cry like I've never heard a baby cry. She would sob like a woman, like she
Wow.
was a woman sobbing. Babies are like, la, la. That's how they
Yeah.
cry when they're little. She would like sob. She'd be asleep and she'd start sobbing. And I remember thinking, where were you? Like, why are you
Mm.
crying like that? What happened?
Yeah.
Like, did you have a previous life where something really traumatic happened to you? Or, like, why are you sobbing like that? It was so, so strange to me that she would sob like that. And that was long before I was a hospice nurse,
That's
pondering,
interesting.
like,
Yeah,
what
because
happened?
you have to think about it. If that is true, what I was saying about them being born and then there's this integration that goes by, it wouldn't be the same amount of time that we register here in the physical, the whole gestation period of the 9 months and the kid comes out and it's been 6 months. For them, it might be like an instant. So you're hearing this baby sob like a woman. And who's to say that she is not dealing with visions and thoughts of being with a hospice nurse and a daughter that's upset and crying, and like who's to say like she's not dealing with all those same things, and now she's trying to integrate into this life, but she's still having those flashbacks.
That's a
It's
good point, because it is kind of the same as when someone's dying and they're transitioning and they're experiencing this place and somewhere else we don't know where.
Mhm.
So, I mean, you could definitely be right. Maybe that is that integration, and there is something happening that she's experiencing somewhere else. So we don't
or
remember anything from when we were infants, right?
exactly,
It's
or the
like,
thing. Sorry, go ahead.
well, it's we know we existed, but we have zero memory of what happened.
Yeah.
I don't remember how old I was when I first have a formed memory. I don't even know. So like what during that time, what was I experiencing and how come I don't remember that, you know?
What were you experiencing? You can't remember what you were seeing. You can't remember
Yeah,
anything like that. So it's
no.
like, yeah, you never know what they could like. Even the fact that your child's born, right? She's sobbing. There's also the aspect of, because I was going to ask you about like near death experiences. I'll just jump into it. But some people, you saw Warren and he had this face of peace, and then you go to this place and it's all peaceful. And then imagine someone looks at you and says, well, you're scheduled to go back. And you feel like it's been a blip, but it's really been like 3 years in like our realm, and the mom's ready and she's giving birth. And they're like, you have to go back. You're going back. No, you didn't get this right. You didn't do this. You were a murderous dictator. You did all these things wrong. And now you have to go back. Hopefully, you learn your lesson this time. And now you're back and you're being held, and you're like, oh my God, I'm the baby again. Because you don't remember those thoughts. You have no idea. And sometimes, for me at least, my baby would look at me like, who are you? Like, what is this? Why are you touching me? Like, who are you? Why are you trying to take my stuff off? Like, what are you doing? Who are you? It was very interesting when she's first like fresh infant. It seemed like a traumatized person. So who knows? Maybe you get sent back, and that's the worst thing ever, when you're this angelic being, and now all of a sudden you have to come back to the solid land place again, where everything's so hard and emotional.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. Or maybe we get to come back and be rich and famous and live on a
That's
yacht, be
yeah,
super
that's
smart, and the world's
yeah.
all good. There's peace everywhere on earth,
That's the hope, right?
and
That's the
no
hope.
murderous dictators.
That's the hope. But I mean, even in that, there's a lesson, and maybe you don't learn your lessons properly when you're that person. And maybe the most lessons you learn is when you're,
Oh,
incarnated as
for
this
sure.
person who's like in a slum and grows up poor their whole life. And like, who knows like how it works and how many times you come back. I like the thing that you said about the movie where it says you choose when. I've always had this concept of a soul family, right? And
Oh,
soul
yes.
family is like these people that you meet, and for some reason like you're even closer than your own family with this person, and you meet them and it's been a month and it feels like it's been years, and it's not always romantic. It's a lot of times it's just friends, but you instantly feel like I know this person right away. I think there's a soul family, and I think you all decide the same way you're going to decide we're all going to the bar. What bar are we going to? We're going to this bar. You going to meet us there? Yeah, I'll be there. Don't worry. When we going? We're going 2025. Okay. Don't worry. I'll be there. And you all go down and you end up going through life, and you all meet up again in some way. And I really do believe that, because there's a few people in my life that I have like that, where I feel like I know this person. There's people I've met recently where I'm like, I know this guy. I'm looking at him and I'm like, I'm talking to him. I'm like, I know him. I know him for sure. I know him. But we just met.
Yeah, so Shirley MacLaine, who's a famous actress, wrote a book called Out on a Limb, and she
Yeah.
talks about that, and she refers to people as twin souls. They're twin
Uh,
souls. But
yeah.
yeah, I know exactly what you mean. People that you meet, you're just like you click with them instantly, and
Yeah.
it feels like you've been with them before. Twin
Yes.
souls.
Yes. Like my wife was very much like that. Like when we were together, it felt like we both knew. Obviously, we learned this after, but we both knew we were going to get married right away. And We had known each other for like a month, and it had felt like we had known each other for years. It was a very odd, but I also have that, because you can just say that's just like romantic love and those chemicals going off. But I have that same thing with friends, where I'm like, oh, this guy's my brother. Like, I have brothers and I love my brothers, but this guy is my brother. And like, even when I talk about my brothers, I mention this guy in that conversation, because it's like, I don't know what it is. And we just have this weird connection, this weird, deep, deep connection. It's indescribable, but I
Yeah,
think there's something to that. There's
I
a
do
little
too.
soul family, you know. But yeah, I like I like that you can get into the weird things. One thing I wanted to ask is, have you ever seen anybody have shared visions at all, where it's maybe the person that's passing and maybe a family member at all?
So, and I think you're referring to what some people call a shared death experience.
Oh, no,
I
I've never
have
heard of
not
that,
had
but
that happen where I've shared visions with someone. I have had, so there was a young woman on TikTok. She was 25 and she was dying of breast cancer.
Mhm.
And she lived, I met her through TikTok. She was kind of sharing her cancer journey. And she lives in Spokane, which is about 3 hours from me. And I said, I want to come and meet you. And so um, I went and met her and I asked her, are you having any visions? And she said, I keep seeing a cat. Um, and her mom told me that she also was seeing this cat. So they were both seeing the same cat. It wasn't a real cat. They knew. And people often will know too, like what they see is a vision and not actually there.
Mhm.
Maybe not at first, because I had one patient who had me looking for her cat till she realized it was a dead cat that she had when she was a kid.
Okay.
But they knew that it wasn't one of their cats, that they could see this cat and both of them could see it. But I had what I consider a shared death experience with my dad when my dad was dying. Um, my dad was from Texas, by the way. He was from
Mhm.
San Antonio, deep South Texas,
Mhm.
and he um, had grown up kind of poor, real poor, and he really made a life for himself by going in the military and retiring from the military, then going to Boeing and being high up in management. And so he liked to spoil himself by collecting things. And one of the things he collected was hats. And in the family room, basement of their house, there was a beam across the ceiling, and he had pegs on the beam, and there were hats hanging on this ceiling. Hats on hats on hats on hats, like so many hats. My dad had Stetsons and fancy baseball caps and just all kinds of hats. Well, my dad was in the hospital for several weeks. He had idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, which is a terminal lung condition, and he got real sick, and so he was hospitalized. And the doctors kept thinking he was, going to get better. And I kept saying, "Well, what about hospice? I'm a hospice nurse, so like I don't know what you're telling me he has is not something that's usually very treatable."
Mhm.
Because he got a kind of pneumonia that's not very treatable for people in his condition. And they assured us that he was going to be fine. He's going to be fine. Well, I finally ended up in the ICU on a BiPAP, and my mom asked me to call the pulmonologist to find out what was going on because they were confused about what was happening. And I called the pulmonologist and I said, can we have a hospice consult? And he said, yeah, it sounds like that's what we need at this point. So the plan was to take him home the next day and I would be his hospice nurse. And he was going to spend the last night in the hospital because the equipment wasn't at their home yet. They had equipment at the home, but it was from home health and it had
Mhm.
to be swapped out for hospice, which was stupid. But he had a hospital bed already at home and they needed to swap that out. So we were going to wait till the next day to take him home. So it was great because he went on hospice and we were able to get him, like, there's this place called the Golden Corral. I don't know if you have those there, but it's an all
Yeah.
you can eat. I call it an all you can eat meat buffet because they have so much meat. So my dad, being from Texas, he'd been on a diabetic diet. He'd been on fluid restriction, but he's from Texas, so he really loves to eat. He really loves to drink. He's a big guy. So we get him this huge plate full of food. We get him a big old venti Starbucks coffee. spend our time with them. We each have our little, like, Dad, you're really important to us moments, see you tomorrow. We'll see you tomorrow. Go back. And I lived about an hour and a half away from my parents. So I had been staying with my parents. So we get home late at night. My mom goes upstairs to bed and my brother gets on the computer downstairs. And I lay down in this hospital bed and I'm looking up at all of these hats hanging on the ceiling. And I'm thinking, wow, look at all those hats hanging up there. He has so many hats hanging up there. And the phone rings and it's the nurse. And she says, you need to come right now. And I didn't even ask any questions. I was like, okay, bye, click, get my brother, get my mom, get in the car. And we're driving to the hospital and my brother's phone rings and he's driving. So I answer the phone and she says, is Brad there? And I said, this is Penny, I just talked to you. What's going on? And she said, your dad just died. I said,
Wow.
oh, okay. And so we get to the hospital and she knew I was a hospice nurse. So she said, do you want to know what happened? Because people like to process death, right? They like to know about these things. And especially because I'm a hospice nurse, I'm curious. And she said, your dad was having trouble breathing. So I got him a little morphine. And then he said, I'm about ready to hang it up. And I went and got him some lorazepam. And when I came back, he was having agonal breaths and then he died. So while my dad said, I'm about ready to hang it up, I was laying in that hospital bed, looking at all those hats hanging on the ceiling and thinking, look at all those hats hanging up there.
Wow.
And it was so profound. It was just the type of thing my dad would say, like, I'm about ready to hang it up, like, this is it. I'm going to die. And it just was really something that I really consider like a shared death experience.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Yeah, I would say so. Definitely. Right at that time. Yeah, right
Yeah,
at
I
that
did the
time.
math in my brain and it was like really right then because he said that to her and she came and called us right after he told her that.
Yeah.
And I was
So
looking at those hats and yeah.
you're like, they're hanging up there. And he's like, I'm hanging it up.
And the weird thing about those hats was how they seemed to multiply. Like we decided that the family members would wear the hats for his memorial. So we all picked out our favorite hats and then we picked out more hats and more. And there was like more and more hats. I kept saying, where are all these hats coming from? Like there's more, there's still hats, like I think it's been 15 years since my dad died. And there's still all these hats hanging down there in the basement, like it's like
Oh man.
we've never exhausted the supply of hats that he had. He had so many.
Every time there's a family member there, they should be given a hat. Every time someone's born, they should be
Yeah,
like
we
this.
do. Actually, we have like you get to pick a hat. Now that you mentioned that, I think the grandchildren haven't had their chance to pick out hats yet. So we're gonna have to let them pick their hats out too.
Yeah, you gotta, definitely. Man, that's something. My father didn't get I always say like it's my dad never had the chance to do anything like that. He passed away in 2017 or 2016. He passed away, and then one of my best friends passed away like a month and a half later. It was like such an odd thing. It was like nobody, like grandparents I've never met before, and then all of a sudden it was like my dad and then my best friend. But my dad, he passed on his own, which is sad. I've always found that very sad that he just passed away. He's just by himself in his apartment. It looked like he was going through, well, he's by himself, right? So he can go through the processing on his own. And it seemed like, if there was any agitation, if there was any fear, it seemed like he was moving things around, or maybe he was moving around, like something was going on. And we can't possibly know what he was doing, but like there was things like the bed was moved in a weird way. His dresser was moved in a weird way. And, he was not the biggest guy, especially as he was passing. He got a little skinnier and everything, but it was just, I always think about that, passing.
Was he terminally ill? Like, did you know he was dying or did he just die?
He kind of, I think he was one of those people that didn't want to go. Definitely. I think it's because he had a lot of regrets. He didn't have a really deep relationship with me. He had a couple of daughters, I think like three, maybe even four. Because after he passed, we found out that there possibly is an older sibling in Jamaica, and we found that there's like a younger one in Canada.
Wow.
So we were, yeah, we were like, because he himself was he was an Air Force guy, right? Like UK Air Force, and he was like traveling around and blah blah blah. Like, so he went from Jamaica to the UK, Canada, like he was all over the place. And that's just like, that's not even him during his service. That's just like during his service, he was like moving around and stuff. So he was a paratrooper, but he had a tumor. I believe it was like in his neck, shoulder area. He had this tumor. It was funny enough. The hospital turned him away at first, and they're like, it's, it's probably nothing. And he was like, nah. He's like, I can't. He's like, I usually drive. I can't drive. I can barely walk. I walked here with a cane. I'm not leaving. You guys should check it out. And then they did, and then they found a tumor, and then they removed it. I believe it was cancerous. Not 100% sure, but I saw him then. I saw him then when he was in the hospital, and then, as far as I knew, again, we didn't have that deep of a relationship. It almost seemed like he didn't want it. It was very odd. It's hard to really tell. I did sober up. I didn't smoke cigarettes anymore. I didn't do any type of drugs anymore. I didn't drink anymore. He smoked, he drank. So it was like we had nothing to connect with, because we'd see each other before. He'd get me a beer, he'd buy me some smokes and stuff, but we didn't have that anymore. I was like becoming very straight laced, and also I was becoming quite Christian. And there's a chance that his father was like very, very devout Christian as well. And I'm named after his father. So maybe he was like seeing that and like being like, this guy's back and I don't want to, I don't want to be around him or something. I don't know. But, yeah, I didn't hear from him for a while. And I guess my brother and my sister, they were keeping in contact with him, but they didn't really let me know if anything was going on. And I remember I was with my now wife. She's my girlfriend at the time. And I got a call from my sister. And like, and then again, like it was weird, because I was like, I was sitting with my wife and I was like, oh, my dad died. Like there was no message or anything. It's just when I saw she called, I was like, oh, he's dead. Like he has to be
Oh,
dead.
wow.
Because like I felt it. I could just feel it. I just felt it. It was a weird feeling I never had before. And I was like, my dad's dead. She's like, don't say that. And I'm like, I'm just gonna go to the washroom in the restaurant and just like check the messages. And then she left the message, and that's exactly what she was saying. And I was like, okay.
Wow. You
Like,
knew. Well,
yeah,
let me tell you about another phenomenon. Some people seem to have the ability to choose their time of death.
hmm.
And people will wait until someone arrives that they want to see before they die. And even more commonly, they will wait until they are alone. They will wait until people leave. So I have seen so many times when somebody is lingering, they're just in the actively dying state for hours or days, and somebody is holding vigil at the bedside. They're not going anywhere. They're just going to stay with that person until the end. And they step out to go to the bathroom, or they step out to make a phone call, and the person dies while they're gone. And I've
Wow.
seen it so many times. And when it happens, people feel so guilty.
Of course.
Like so many times I have people say, I tried to get there. I drove as fast as I could, and I still couldn't make it before he died. And I always say, if your dying person needs for you to be there when they die, they will wait for you to get there before they take their last breath. I've just seen
Yeah.
it so many times. I honestly believe it's not a coincidence that it is contrived. Like somehow they are able to wait. And I've had patients who were lingering, and I'd say to the family, like, first of all, I always say lingering does not equal suffering. Death takes as long as it takes, and sometimes it takes a while, and we don't know what's going on in here, right? They might be doing life review and processing. We don't know. They're readying themselves. And as long as they're comfortable, it does not mean that they're suffering. The family is suffering because they're in this holding pattern and they're waiting for the person that they love to die, which feels like crap, like
Yeah.
that can cause a lot of guilt. But there comes a point where sometimes we start saying, well, is there something that they're waiting for? Did everybody talk to them? Have they said goodbye to everyone they needed to? oh, well, she has a sister who lives on the East Coast who can't travel anymore. And, they were never able to say goodbye. And so we hold the phone up for the person and say to them, look, she's not going to talk back to you, but could you please, let her know what you need to tell her. And so
Mhm.
hold the phone up, and then they are able to finally die after they get that phone call, or that last person. I've seen people waiting for somebody who was in another country who's trying to get here. The plane is delayed. They're going through everything they can. They had to wait for the Red Cross to tell the military that their grandmother's dying or whatever, and it's like, oh my gosh, are they going to make it? Are they going to make it? And then they do, because the person was able to wait that long for them to arrive. So, I
Yeah.
feel like if your dad needed for you to be there or for anyone to be with them, then he probably would have waited.
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, I remember my brother, because my brother and him, they had like a pretty close connection. And my brother tells me the story of being like, he was leaving. He was leaving because they would see each other like every weekend or something like that. And he was leaving. And my dad, like, he kind of like, from the sound, like when he told me the story, it was just like, this is the last time I saw dad. But to me, it sounded like dad was like saying goodbye, because he was
Mm-hmm.
like, it's you and me against the world. It's you and me. And then he left. And then I think he tried to call him the next weekend. And it was like so odd that I think dad either didn't call or he didn't answer. I forget what he said, but, and then he kind of knew as well, kind of thing. So yeah, it seemed like he wanted to be alone. Because also when you talk about the process, he wasn't, I remember when we were in the apartment clearing it out, it didn't seem like he was eating all that much. There wasn't like a fridge filled with food. It was like there was a
Yeah.
banana, there was some beers, I think there was like an apple, but there's nothing too much. It was like the fridge was empty. I was like, huh. I'm like, that's odd. So I'm like, maybe he
That's
was just at the
the
point of not eating.
Yeah, that's one of the earliest signs of somebody approaching death is they start sleeping more and they start eating less.
Mm,
And that's a biological thing because our body's shutting down and it doesn't need calories and nutrition anymore. And it's going into energy conservation. The dying process is, like a process, Department of Redundancy department. But in order for us to complete that process, the vital organs need to keep going until the very end. And so our body intuitively is going to go into energy conservation, and
mm,
digestion is the most energy consuming process in our body. So our body's going to be like, yeah, we don't need that anymore because you're dying. You don't need that nutrition anymore. And so
yeah.
let's slow down the digestion. And just like when people are getting closer to the end of life, they start getting cold hands and feet or discoloration on their hands and feet, called mottling, because again, the body's going, we need that oxygenated blood right here. This is where it really matters. And so
Yeah.
the hands and feet will start to get cold. So that
Wow.
is an early sign that people are starting to move towards the end of life. And sometimes that process can be really quick. And sometimes people die suddenly. Somebody can have a cardiac event, drop dead. I've had
Mhm.
patients that did that too. But that is more rare. Like it is really more rare for a person to just die suddenly, unless it's an accident. But when
Yeah.
we're talking about natural death, like dying from natural causes, usually they're going to go through this dying process, but that process can be very quick or it can be drawn out.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense because, in a lot of different, I'm Christian, but I've seen it in all types of religions. Like when people want to get closer to God, they fast. They start fasting. They start
Yeah.
saying, let's not eat anything. It's going to help us. So it's going to help us, get closer to God, connect more. You're not worried about any food or anything. And it helps your spirit in a way. So it's interesting that people who are passing through and having the most spiritual experience you could possibly have, they also get into the not fasting thing as well, or into the not eating thing as well. That's wild. Wild. What a wild job you have.
I'm
Yeah.
retired now, though,
Oh, you're
I'm
not like in direct care anymore?
no, I actually retired in June. Yeah. I
Oh
hadn't
yeah?
been doing direct care for a few years. I was doing hospice quality management. So,
Yeah.
Medicare requires hospices to have a program a quality program to ensure that, you know, people are being cared for appropriately at the end of life. And so I was doing quality management. So I was living off the grid in my cabin in the mountains, doing that 3 days a week. And I retired fully in June. So now it's all doing education on TikTok and all my social media channels still.
Wow.
So
Did you think you'd be saying that when you first got into to hospice care, that you thought you'd be
no,
saying, I do all my education on TikTok?
I didn't even know what TikTok was until the pandemic. And then I heard about it. And like everyone else, you know, I'm in lockdown, bored, and I get on there. I wasn't thinking that I was going to talk about hospice and death and dying. I was trying to learn how to shuffle dance. You know, I was doing the little trends. And, you know, back then, that was 5 years ago. At my age, you know, at that time, I'm in my late 50s. And so I'm not thinking anybody's interested in what I have to say, but I told the story about the nun, you know, or the patient with the nun daughter, and it went viral. And I was like, oh my God, people want to hear about this. And I've been a passionate advocate for hospice since I became a hospice nurse, you know, and I know there are lots of myths out there, you know, disinformation, and thought, wow, this is a great way for me to educate the public at a grassroots level. And, you know, kind of did no idea that it was going to take off like it did, or that I would ever be mentioned on the Joe Rogan podcast, or that I would publish a book, or, you know, any of that. But it's been, you know, very fulfilling for me to be able to do this, because I really am I really am passionate about it. I've seen how people can have a good death, and I've seen how people can have a bad death, and I feel like I know the answer to help to facilitate that good death versus the bad death. And I'm like a hospice guru, preacher, teacher.
Yeah, and you know, even just, I mean, hospice, the important topic as well. I mean, that's a word that I'm sure a lot of people don't even know, but just the topic of speaking about passing and making that something that's less taboo, it really helps because, you know, if you go back far enough, it was not like elders used to be more revered. Passing away was something that was taken, you were confronted with it in a much different way than we're confronted with it now. And now
Mhm.
I think everything's just so materialistic that you are taught to not focus on that. It's supposed to be something you just push to the side. And I think there should be, I know for me it's helping tremendously. There should be an acceptance of it, you know? There should be an accepting instead of pushing it aside and letting it be that thing that gives you crazy anxiety and then you just block it out and then you just go about your day. I don't think it should be like that. I think we should really build up more talking about it myself. I mean, I had an episode that I did where I was talking about how I don't think death is the end. And, you know, I was talking about this, I think it's the Ojibwe. I think they're called the Ojibwe, but they refer to death as the great awakening. It's like an awakening process that happens. You know, the Sufis, I think it's Sufism. They say, they have like a saying where they say man is asleep and death is like his awakening, you know. And the more I see of things like that, these more ancient, older wisdoms all talking about death that way, there has to be something to that, because it's not like they're even trying to comfort you. They're trying to let you, even the ancient Egyptians, they weren't really trying to comfort you about death. In fact, the ancient Egyptians would say, when you pass, you're going to be tested. There is going to be, like, maybe that's why you have a life review, because it's like, okay, it's time to cram. I've done the whole course. It's time to cram. I got to get all this stuff because I'm going there and they're going to have a lot of questions, because the ancient Egyptians even had like a map of the solar system of where your spirit would go. And, you know, I was talking to someone else and they even had something about where you would go through the solar system. And it was almost like there were all these lessons that you had to have learned. And then if you didn't, you would pass back to Earth and become a person again. And you just
Wow.
take the test over again. So there's many cultures that talk about it like that. And I think we have to wake up to that in Western society.
Yeah, well, you know, back in the old days, before, you know, medical technology advanced to the point where we can keep people alive for longer, grandma and grandpa, they died in the house with the family present. And so it was a part of life. It was a part of everyone's life to experience it. And it was what it was, and then when we start putting people in the hospitals and tuck them away in there and let them die in the hospital, and stop letting our kids go to funerals because we might traumatize them if they go to a funeral. We don't want them to see dead people, and we don't want to talk about it. Like my mom said to me, Grandpa fell asleep and never woke up again. That's what death is. That's what creates this fear and anxiety, is keeping it, out of the mainstream, out of the conversation,
Yeah.
and like acting like it's something that won't happen as long as we don't talk about it. But really, that is what happened. And now, with hospice coming around, and in the, I think, early 80s, it became a Medicare benefit. Hospice was around in the 70s, but it wasn't until the early 80s, I believe, that it became a Medicare benefit. It's kind of returning people back to their home, because really that's where the hospice care primarily takes place, is in the person's home. Hospitals don't want deaths on their statistics. They don't want that there. So they're going to try to get people out into their, out of the hospital, so that, because it looks bad. If you're hospital shopping and you're looking at their death stats, you're going to be like, holy crap, that hospital has 50% death rate. I don't want to go there,
Wow.
so they want to get them out of there. And the majority of people who die on hospice are going to die in their home or wherever they call home. So nursing home, boarding home, van down by the river, that's where people are mostly going to die who are on hospice. So we're returning death to the family home. And I love that. And I love being able to, educate people who say, well, I'm thinking about, I have cancer and I'm thinking I want to die in the hospital because I have young kids and I don't want them to see me like this. And I say, well, wait a minute. If you go to the hospital, then they're at the mercy of whoever wants to take them to see you during visiting hours. They don't get to just climb in the bed and give you a snuggle if they want to do that. They don't get to see what is changing with you. And so that, to the point where once you've died, you don't look the same. And if they're given the opportunity to see you, it's going to be more scary to them, like
Yeah.
as they see the death happening, as they see the changes happening, they know that's still mom or dad. They are still with you and their children, and they're not going to be afraid of what they're seeing, versus take them out, their imagination is going to be way more terrifying to them than reality,
Yeah.
So I think it's just so important that we are including children in the conversation. And I love being able to educate about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's actually well said. Your imagination is way worse, especially in regards to this topic. Your imagination just, I don't know about anybody else listening, but your imagination just, for me at least, it just goes nuts with what could happen. And I don't know. It's just, there's so much. I mean, especially towards, I'm starting to get over my own mortality. Like, I'm just trying to appreciate things more. But, thinking about my own mother, because that's who I have left, in terms of parents, right? And grandparents. All the grandparents are gone. But I know that I'm possibly going to have to go through this. And honestly, that's best case scenario, right? Like, I don't want her to pass away alone, and I don't want to be afraid and stay away, and all those things you just said. And I don't want my daughter to have to do that, or any other kid we have, God willing, before anything happens to her. So yeah, it's a hard thing to wrestle with, but it's very necessary, very, very necessary to think about,
Yeah, to think about and to talk about too.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
important to talk about it, because then the time comes when they are dying and you don't know, like, what kind of music do they want to listen to? Do they want you to hold their hand? Do they want to be alone? Would they prefer to die alone, or would they want people in the room with them? That's another thing that's very important to try to, talk about. And getting your advance directives together and telling your partner or whoever is your decision maker what you want, and that should start in young adulthood. You should be able to know in young adulthood, what kind of things you want for yourself. I always joke that my husband is like, how they say the cobbler's kids have no shoes. My husband has been very, very challenging to get advance directives out of. And I always tell him, well, then you're at my mercy, because if you won't tell me what you want, how will I know? And I'm going to make choices based on what I know about you. And
Yeah.
I was finally able to pin him down and have him fill out this booklet called The Five Wishes. And it's fivewishes.org. It's like $6 to buy this booklet, and it helps you to kind of navigate through the things that you might want to know if you are in a situation where you're, dying. And so I've been trying to get him to do it forever. And we recently changed our wills and changed our power of attorney, because he had his older brother, be his power of attorney for healthcare after me. I'm first, of course. And, his older brother has also been the durable power of attorney for their mother, who's very old and been struggling in a nursing home. And it's wearing on him to make those decisions. And I said to my husband, one, he's older than you, so there's a good chance he might die before you. And two, I don't think he's going to want to do it, because he's already expressing how he doesn't like doing it for your mom. And I think you should choose your daughter. He has a son and a daughter. The son he's not very close with, but he's close with his daughter. And I said, I think she should be your alternate. If something happens to me, she should be the one who is going to be your decision maker. But you have to tell her what you want. And so I finally got the 5 wishes out and was able to make him, answer the questions, because I said, you've got to tell her what you want. Otherwise, do you want to be in a nursing home being spoon-fed pureed foods? I know him well enough to know that he is not going to want that. You're not going to want a tube feeding or anything like that. So, but she isn't going to know that. And, if you don't tell the person that's making those decisions for you what you want, then they have to guess. And it can create a lot of guilt and regret for them, because they don't know what to do. And usually the people are going to err on the side of life,
Yeah, I never thought of that, really. I mean, my mom, she's brought it up here and there. She says she wants a party. She said she wanted hip hop music played. That's about as much as she said. I'm not sure she said I think she said cremated. I'm pretty sure she said cremated. And funny enough,
that's all after she dies. But more important than that is, what does she want before that time? Does she want to die in the hospital? Does she want to die at home? Does she want to be in a nursing home? Does she want, lots of people around? Or
that is something to think about.
Prayer? Does she want? Some people like to jump to harps. That is the one thing I was able to get out of my husband, because there's this little store, this country store that we used to go to, and they would always be playing loud harp music. And he'd say, God, I hate that harp music. Why are they doing that? So at least I knew he's not going to want harp music. But people will jump to, like, oh, we should have it dark and quiet, and let's play harps and mellow music. And I'm thinking, no, I have a list already, and my daughters know what it is. Partridge Family's on there, Styx, Pat Benatar, like that's what I want to listen to. But if you don't know, then you're going to pick what you like, because
that's interesting. I've never thought about that. What would I want? What would I want playing? I don't know. I've always, since before I even had a podcast, I always enjoyed talking to people more than anything, more than going to clubs, more than drinking, more than drugs, more than going out and trying to get girls. I've always loved, like, if my friends were like, I don't know, there's not much to do, we're just going to sit inside, I'd be like, oh yeah, that's great. Like, we're just going to talk for 4 hours. Like, let's go. Like, that's the best thing for me. So I think I would want whoever was there, God willing, I'm a grandfather, I would just want to talk to them. I think that's what I would want. I just want to talk to them throughout the whole thing. Yeah.
And when you can't talk anymore, maybe you just want to hear them talking.
Exactly. Yeah.
A lot of people are like that.
The very last podcast conversation between my grandkids.
Yeah.
The very last podcast I listened to.
There you go. That would be awesome. I remember one patient that I had, I walked into the room, it was at the care center. So I walk into the room and there was just wall to wall people. There's so many people in the room, and snacks on the table, and the football games playing, really loud in there. And she's actively dying. And I took one of the sons aside and I said, do you think this is okay for her? And it was a new nurse at the time, you know. Do
Yeah.
you think this is okay for her? And he said, oh, she was the football party queen. She hosted every weekend. She loved this. And it was so eye-opening for me to, oh, okay, like this is what she wanted, you know?
Mm.
And that was kind of the start of realizing that, you know, when people are dying, they're still alive. So Barbara Carnes is this famous hospice nurse, started in the 70s, wrote a ton of literature for hospice. And she says, you know, there's no such thing as dying. We're born and then we die, and everything in between is life. It's living. So that really puts it into perspective. Like, even though you're dying, you're still living until you take your last breath. And what you liked while you were living, you're going to like while you're dying,
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
living.
Yeah. Exactly. In between. In between.
In the in between. Yeah.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. See, this is exactly why I wanted to have this conversation, because there's so many things that you are gonna think of and have to think of all the time and have to make people confront all the time that we just don't regularly hear in podcasts or everyday conversation. I just yeah, I'm gonna start considering that a lot more of what needs to be done beforehand. Yeah, it's such an interesting question. Like, I had my friend who passed away, my good friend. He was like, oh, she's sorry. He was like a brother to my brother. And then when I got older, he became like a brother to me. And he loved Tupac. He loved Tupac. He was like this white ginger guy. His name's Gidon, Buddy Gidon. Rest in peace, Gidon. I loved him so much. And he loved Tupac. And we played Tupac because he was in a coma before he passed. And right away, like, he wasn't moving at all. And then right away, as soon as we started playing it, he started moving. Like, his hands started moving. And then, like, the little vitals started like changing. They were different than they were before. And it was nuts. It was nuts. But at least people knew. Like, my brother knew, another family friend that we had there, he knew. They were like, yo, put this song on. They're like, Ambitions of a Rider. This is what he wants to hear for sure. And we played that for a while. We hung out with him for hours, just playing his favorite songs and just talking, being around and just talking like we would do if he was, fully conscious. And yeah. I think
There
that's
have
what he
been
wanted.
studies, there have been studies that evidence that people can hear up until their time of death. So
Mm,
even if they're not talking to you, they can still hear your voice.
yeah.
So we always encourage people, to talk to their person who's dying. They can hear you. My
Yeah.
social worker I work with would say they may not understand the words, but they understand the intent.
Ah, yeah. That makes a lot of sense. That actually makes a lot of sense on different levels too. Because yeah, my brother, he brought him in close and he was like talking to him. He couldn't like pick him up, he's in a coma, right? But he like brought him close and was like saying things to him, and you could see like he was changing. Like, the things were changing. It was like very, very interesting what was happening. But yeah, he ended up passing like 3 days later, but at least I think it was maybe even 2 days later. But at least he got that part. Like, the people that he grew up with, that he had like family, they all came, and he could hear them. He could hear them, and we talked and this and that, and it was good. It was good. But again, he was younger than I am now, and he didn't have anything written out in terms of what he wanted. If he wanted to be taken off life support, if he wanted to be kept on, if he wanted to be moved, if he wanted someone to wait, if he was in a coma, to see how much longer it could take, maybe wait 3 weeks, maybe,
Mm,
he didn't have all that laid out. So again, like you said, his mom and his sister had to just do what they thought was best. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, because young people can die, and
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just really important to have that, at least the basics. Like, if I'm in a coma and the doctor decides that I am in a vegetative state, do you want, to continue to live like that? And we've seen the cases, like Terry Schiavo was the famous one, who was in a coma for, I think, over a decade, maybe more than 2 decades. And her
Wow.
husband had to go to court and battle with her parents. And then we had the young woman in Georgia who died, and they kept her alive. She was pregnant. And that was another, well, in that case, the parents knew what she wanted, but didn't have a choice in that matter. But there's been lots of cases where people who are in a coma, the family doesn't know like what to do. Like, should we keep them like this? Or, you know, because unfortunately what happens is, you know, if somebody's in a persistent vegetative state, they are going to need to be tube fed. And so you put the tube in and you think, okay, well, maybe they're going to come out of this, but then they don't. And then you have to make a decision to stop the tube feeding. And so you're actually going to be starving them to death. And that's what people struggle with. And that's what happened with Terry Schiavo, is that her husband was like, she would not want to live like this. I want to stop the tube feeding. And her parents were like, no, we are not going to do that to her. She's in there. We know it. We're going to let her keep going. So really making sure that people know what you want is important.
Very important. You know? Very important. Thank you for shedding light on that. I never thought of that. I'm thinking, like, as you're talking, like, my wife's going to be like, oh my God, this guy goes and does a podcast, and now all of a sudden I got to fill out these 5 wishes, and he's making me think about this, and now I got to go talk to my dad, and oh my God. These podcasts, like, come on. But it's important.
It took me, I've been married for 20 years, almost 21 years, and it's taken me that long to get my husband on board. And as long as I've been a hospice nurse, I've been married to this husband, and it's taken me that long. So, you know, like, sometimes you got to stick your toe in the water and just warning, this is going to be coming up, unless, you know, and who knows, maybe she'll be like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. Or she might be like, yeah, we'll put it on the shelf and let it collect dust for a while. And, you know, eventually it'll come back down again. But you plant the seed, and then eventually the tree will grow.
She's way better at it than I am. Dealing with stuff like this, she's like way better at it. She hasn't had a parent, but she's had grandfathers go through pretty rough passings. She has 2 grandmothers that are, you know, they're getting older. They're not super aware of what's going on. They're in homes and stuff like that. And yeah, so she's had to kind of deal with the eventuality of somebody passing away. She's had to deal with that like consistently for a long time. Whereas me, it's like my mom right now is like doing 200-pound deadlifts and waking up at 5 a.m. every morning and getting 10,000 steps in before 7 a.m. Yeah, she's like 72. So it's like, I'm not really ready, because like she's just like, hey, what's going on? Wait, how long have you been up? What are you sleeping in late? What, did you wake up at 7 a.m.? Like, so she's different. Yeah, my mom's like she's an ex-bodybuilder. So
wow.
Yeah, she was competing back when women just didn't compete. I mean, this is like, I'm 39. She was competing when I was like 9. So this is like 30 years ago. So she was some of the first crop of female bodybuilders ever. And, you know, just getting out there and, you know, just competing and working out hard and waking up every day at 4 a.m., doing Rocky style stuff and chewing on bread and spitting it out because you can't have the carbs, but you just want to taste bread. Like, she's,
oh man, no, thank you. No.
She was doing that for a while. It was wild. And then right after the competition, you get like 2-3 Big Macs, and she just eat those. And yeah, she's been a health nut for a very, very long time. So
I wonder if when she's dying someday, she's going to want to have something like a cheeseburger. So my stepmother-in-law, I talk about her in my book as well, got cancer, and she had always been really proud of her physique. She never had kids, and she was tall and thin, and she had modeled when she was younger, and she worked out all the time, and everything she ate was all diet food, you know. And when she was dying, she wanted a cheeseburger. She wanted a cheese. She had deprived herself, so she was like, I want a cheeseburger.
Yeah.
She only had a couple bites of it, but man, did she ever love it. So maybe your mom will be like, yeah, I want some bread. This time I'm not going to spit it out. I'm going to swallow that bread.
Yeah, there's probably, you know, it's funny enough, my My grandmother was like that. And I didn't know I only met my grandmother, my mom's mom, like once. But when she was passing, there's like a cousin I have in Barbados, and everybody was like, you can't eat badly, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, I'm old, probably gonna die. So she would like take her like little grandson aside and be like, go get me fried chicken. She'd be like, I want fried chicken. Just go get it. Just listen to me. Don't listen to them. Go get me fried chicken. And she would just like have fried chicken, like just secretly, because she'd be like,
Good
whatever,
for
like
her.
I'm almost done. Like, just it's fine. Don't worry. Don't worry. Like, what am
I
I gonna
love
do?
that. I love that. When people talk about how hospice starves their patients, I always say, no, we don't. We love to give them what they want to eat, but they
Mhm.
usually don't want to eat a lot. But when they do, we let them have what they want. You're diabetic, that's fine. Here's some ice cream. Have what you
Yeah.
want. You want a cocktail on your deathbed? Sure, you betcha. What do you want? I used to be a
That's
bartender.
funny.
I'll mix it for you. Oh, you got lung cancer and you want to smoke a cigarette? Sure, that's okay. It's fine. Family will be concerned about it. They'll be like, well, we don't want him to have a cigarette. Cigarettes are what's killing him. Well, it's not going to kill him any faster to have a cigarette. And everybody in the world knows that cigarettes will kill you eventually, if given the chance. So if if smoking was that much of an addiction to them or a crutch to them, and brought them joy essentially, then let's let them do it at the end of their life. It's not going to hurt anything.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, yeah, I feel the same way. I mean, as much as, and you know where it's coming from. They're just like, this, if we just keep him as healthy as possible, he'll stay around for as long as possible, etc. But I guess you got to be able to do what you want to do.
But speaking of DMT, so you know, whenever I've done videos about deathbed visioning, I'd get people in my comment section saying, it's just DMT causing hallucinations. And I'd always just reject that flat out. Like, it's not DMT. And then finally, one day I thought, I'm going to do a little research on this DMT.
Mhm.
And I found that DMT is naturally occurring in plants and animals. They
Yeah.
haven't really done any studies on humans who are dying, but they have done studies on rats. And there is a small amount of DMT that's released from the brain when a rat is killed with a heart attack. And so that's what these people are telling me, like, it's DMT. They did studies, da, da, da. I'd be like, no, it's not. It's not. It's not. It's not. They really see spirits. So I did this research, and the way that DMT has been used, which I know I'm not telling you anything, is to achieve a higher level of awareness and
Yeah.
communicate with the dead, right?
Well,
And so then I
yeah.
started thinking, okay, so the possibility of DMT being released from our brains when we die, and or these visions that they are seeing being actual real spirits of the dead,
Yeah.
do not have to be mutually exclusive. It
Yeah.
could be it could be that there is DMT that's released from our brain, and that's why we can see visions of our deceased loved ones when we're dying.
Yeah.
So it doesn't, that it's possibly DMT doesn't negate the fact that it could still be real spirits that people are seeing.
Oh, as you go
So,
down the rabbit hole of the visions that you see, I mean, some people may tell you that it's DMT because they're trying to say that it's not real. But when you're having multiple people around the world experiencing the same entities, seeing the same entities,
mhm,
describing the same type of realm that they're entering into,
mhm,
who's to say that that's not real? And then on top of that, when it comes to DMT, it's not even like it's just being released from the brain. It's being released from this the place in your head that has been paid such reverence by ancient Egypt. Even the Catholic Church acknowledges the pine cone, the pineal gland that's
right.
inside your brain. That is where it comes from. And that's also called the seat of the soul. That's what they call that little part of your brain, the pineal gland. They call that the seat of your soul. So the fact that you pass away and then all of a sudden that's activated, released, and you see something else and go somewhere else, that doesn't make it fake to me. That makes it all more real, in my opinion.
Mhm.
I think when
Yeah.
we have it externally and you're smoking it or take whatever you're doing, I think that's us trying to force it a little bit, but
Mhm.
it does happen naturally as people are passing. And it also, they've also seen signs of it in your lungs as well. That's why a lot of people practice a lot of breath work. because
Oh,
the lungs along with the mind, you can kind of get yourself into a state where you're releasing DMT and you're kind of having that experience. So, well, and I say kind of because I've never had it before. The people who do this and know how to do it, they're like, it is a full blown trip. You are not on anything. You feel it exactly the same way you would if you took it. It's the most wild trip you'll ever have. A lot of people say that. Monks even report having the same type of feelings when they go into deep states of meditation where they're also breathing and, you know, connecting with that whole thing. So yeah, those people who are saying it because they're trying to make it seem like the visioning that these people are having isn't real, I think they don't even realize they're making a case for why it is so
right.
real, you know.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And that was the way it's being presented is it's just hallucinations. It's just
Yeah,
DMT. It's only DMT without the, the idea that it could be, they really are seeing spirits of the dead because it's DMT.
I mean,
So that
I
was real.
yeah, you're no, you're a hundred, you're completely locked into it. You're 100% right. And I mean, as somebody who has delved deep into the psychedelic realm and had so many friends do it as well, I have a lot of I've heard a lot of the same experiences that you're talking about as someone's dying. I've, you know, many people when it came to psychedelics, they experience visioning, but they also, exactly what you said, they experience shared visions as well, shared visions that happen at the same time where they're seeing the same thing on a wall. I actually had that with one of my friends that I was talking about being like a soul family member. I've had that with him where I'm looking at something and I'm like, you can see this. He's like, yeah. I'm like, but it's not there. He's like, it's there. I'm like, so it is there? He's like, yeah, you can see it. I'm like, okay, hold on. We're like playing like who's on first here. I'm like, is this thing real? He's like, no. He's like, we're seeing it. But I'm like, you're seeing it. He's like, yes. I'm like, point to it. Point to this. He's like, yeah, there. And he's explaining the exact same thing that I'm hallucinating. So
Oh,
there's a lot more research that has to go in. I've had people have I've heard people talk about stories of shared conversations where neither of them were speaking and they were both just
oh,
like kind
wow.
of sitting there in like a vegetated, like transed out space. And they had a clear conversation to where they're like, did you talk? And they're like, no. And they're like, but we talked about, and they're like, yeah, we talked about this and this and this. I've seen all these things. So I think there really is a, I think there really is this unseen realm that we are not privy to in this waking life that we live because wouldn't be able to handle it all going on
Right.
at
Right.
once. You can only handle
Yeah.
so much. And that's why when you're passing, all of a sudden it becomes clear to you because
Yeah.
you're stepping out of this heavy, you know, solid state and you're stepping into something else. You know, some people call it the fourth dimension. You could call it heaven. You can call it whatever you want, but there's something. There's definitely something. And
Yeah.
there's light
I
and there's
agree.
darkness inside of this realm. And, you know, hopefully you're seeing most of the light stuff.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Yeah. Have you ever had anybody, because you're always dealing with people who are passing away. Have you ever had any hear about any like near death experiences at all?
So it's funny when people have asked me that in the past, I've always immediately said no. And then it occurred to me one day that you don't have to survive to have had a near death experience. So I would say, yeah, people, I mean, like I've seen lots of people having near death experience, many of my patients, but I've never known anybody personally who had a near death experience who survived and was still living afterwards. They all died.
Yeah,
So they
yeah,
were
yeah.
near death and they had experiences, but then they all died. So
They,
I've read about them, but I've never known anybody who almost died and had that experience.
I played for the audience. I played this one near death experience that this firefighter had, and it reminded me of the person you were talking about when they were like, "Am I going to need these? Am I going to need this?" And
Mm-hmm.
you know, it
Mm-hmm.
reminded me of that because what he said as he was passing, I guess, you know, in our world, they were like, "This guy's dying right now." They're like scrambling and everything. He was passed away. He was flatlined, right? And he said in that time, he was in this place where he was seeing all these orbs, But what he said was, which was so interesting, he's like, I can't believe that I actually thought I was that person with those wife and kids. He's like, I can't believe I thought that life was real. That was the thing that he said. He's like, I can't believe I thought that was real. He's like, obviously this is what's real. And it's like he clicked in right away, and he says he went to this place, and it was a lot like being born, because he went to this place and these people knew him and they loved him. And he's like, I don't know who you guys are. And they're laughing. They're like, they're like, do you remember? They're like, you don't remember. And he said, they were hooded. They had like big smiles. They were really happy to see him. He's like, he felt like nothing but love from them, but they were just laughing. They're like, he doesn't even remember. And then he said this one taller guy who was almost like staticky, like he was moving in and out of a realm, walked up, and he had a really deep voice, and he put his hand on his shoulder. He's like, how you doing? And he's like, so what's next? He's like, I'm here, my brothers. He's like, what are we going to do? Review my life? And he's like, we could do that if you'd like. He's like, and he sat down with them, and he was going over the life. And the guy looked at him. He said, you have to go back. And he's like, I don't want to go back. He's like, listen, he goes, that woman, that my wife, whoever, he goes, those people are strong. They're fine. They're resilient. He goes, I want to stay here. He's like, my brothers. He's like, I want to stay with these. I want to stay. And he's like, no, man, you have to go back. And then slowly, like, it all deteriorated, and then he like woke up again. But it was such an interesting take to hear, what, like, where he's like, I can't believe I thought I was that person. And it just goes back to what we were talking about with like being born, passing away. If who knows where you are before you're born, and who's to say that you're not processing some wild life that just took place, or you're with a bunch of people who are like your soul family, and you're like, why am I leaving you guys? You know, kind of like your first day of kindergarten. You're like, why do I have to? I'm with mom and dad. What do you mean? This is where I stay. What do you mean I have to go to this other place and learn for like what? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
You know? It was interesting, very interesting. But I just wanted to know if you had any near-death experience. I want to know something with you, because I always get into paranormal and weird stuff. Have you ever had some weird paranormal stuff happen inside of work or outside of work to you?
Inside of work, working night shift. I wasn't a night shift worker at the care center, but occasionally I would work nights, and we had these pagers that would ring, like if a person called us from their room, it would say the room number, and then we closed the door and locked it at 8 o'clock at night. So if somebody rang the doorbell, it would say front door. And my pager went off to the front door, and I went and checked, and nobody was there. And then I came back to the nurse's station, and then a little while later it went off again, front door, and I went to the front door and nobody was there. And then I came back to the nurse's station, and then one of the regular nurses came to the nurse's station, and I said, my pager keeps going off to the front door, but there's nobody there. And she said, yeah, that's the spirits coming to get the patients. You watch, they're going to die. There's going to be some deaths tonight. And sure enough, you know, there was a couple of people that died that night. She said, they're coming to get the patients. So I was like, whoa. She was very matter of fact about it too, you know, like, yeah, they're just coming to get the patients. I was like, what? That was kind of weird. And then another thing that happened was my sister and I, when we were teenagers, we got into this, we didn't have a Ouija board, but we made one. We called this the glass game, and we used Scrabble tiles on a board with a glass and put our fingertips on the glass.
Yeah.
And, you know, of course, we're each going, are you making it move? No, I'm not. Are you making it move? No, I'm not. And so we wanted to test it out. So we had my brother write down questions and answers, and then he would tell us the question, and we would ask it the question, and it would tell us the answer that he had written down. And then we asked, like, what is your name? And it told us a name, and we were so scared. We slept together that we never played it again. My sister still remembers to this day, 50 years later, you know, the name that it told us. I don't remember anymore. She still remembers, but we were terrified. We slept together for like a week after that.
Wait, was this a Ouija board, or?
It was a Ouija board that we made. Like, we took Scrabble tiles and
You
used a
made it.
glass and summoned the spirits, you know. It was a makeshift Ouija board. You know, we read about it in a book or something, and
Oh my
that thing
God.
was moving all over the place. It was freaky. It really freaked us out.
Wow. That is terrible. Don't do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
You cannot do that. Oh, how mortified I'd be if I came home, my kids were doing that. I'd be like, oh my God. Well, we got to
That
move
was
now, guys.
pretty
Look what
scary.
you
We
did.
survived though, so we're still okay.
That's wild though, about being in the place and your pager going off and then somebody just
Yeah.
being like, that's the spirits coming. And then people
Yeah.
actually
Very
pass.
matter of fact. Yeah, it happens all the time. It's just the spirits coming to get the patients. And
Wow.
sure enough, several patients died that night.
Wow. Wow. I mean, this again, we can only handle so much with our sight and things like that. We can only handle so much. So I wouldn't be surprised if, yeah, I'm a full believer that all those things, the visioning that you're talking about, the veil getting thin, I'm a full-fledged believer that all that is very real, and that our brain is just, we have this hubris as people that it's like, well, we understand the brain quite a bit. And it's usually like these guys who are just like, well, I actually understand because I wrote this thing down. But I think we can't even comprehend the power that we really have in our brain and our soul and everything, you know?
Yeah, I agree.
But I want to ask you, because you're all about dying, right? Um the Queen of Death is who I'm talking to right now,
Queen of Death.
guys. But how do you feel about these guys who are in tech right now, who are pretty much trying to move towards people living forever? The Elon Musks, the Peter Thiels, and things of that nature.
Oh, I just think it's ridiculous. For one, it's never going to happen. It's just never
Mhm.
going to happen. And I just think it's arrogance. I mean, this world is already overpopulated. Where are we going to put more people? I don't want to deprive my grandchildren an opportunity to live in a world that can support them. You know, like I just think it's ridiculous. I don't believe it'll ever happen, and I don't want to live forever. We don't know what happens after we die. So why would we, like want to live forever and not find out what happens after we die? You know,
Mhm.
I don't think it's a great idea at all. I think they should be putting their money into trying to um, help people who die young, from pediatric cancer to live to adulthood. That's where the money should go, not to, take old farts like me and let us live forever. That's just, it's a waste of money in my mind. And also, again, like the world is overpopulated. It's Where are we going to put everybody?
I
I don't get it. I think people that are doing that are, I don't know what they're thinking. They're afraid of death, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's a I think yeah, listen, I always tell people put on their tinfoil speedos. I think there's an air of something demonic with that whole thing of them wanting people to live forever, of them wanting people to never transition. Like you said, you don't know what
Mhm.
happens after you pass. And it seems like from your experiences, there's peace washing over people. You've been through this cycle so many times with so many different people. It's actually a normal part of this cycle. Why would you want to stop that cycle?
Right,
Like if your
right,
soul is real and it's actually there and there's an afterlife, why would you want to stop people from entering that afterlife? It's
right,
just
right. I mean, totally. Like we don't know what happens, and you are going to stop it if you are. And I still will say it's never going to happen. We're never going to be able to live forever. There's just no way, unless you're like going to have bionic parts or something. But
that's
or get surgery to replace everything that's aging. It's unavoidable. It's unavoidable. We're all going to die. But I just I think about things like, in what my family was recently talking about animals that are extinct now, you know,
mhm,
because we move into these areas and then we kill off the population. They're predators. We're killing off the predators in Yellowstone National Park. And so then, because we're killing off the predators who are keeping the herds of elk under control, then the elk start eating these plants that are by the river down
Yeah.
to nothing. And then the river starts to overflow. And then we got flooding. And then we got, we've just climate change, everything that we're doing to destroy the earth right now is going to be supersized if we live forever. I
Yeah, because
mean,
they are
there's just,
exactly what you're saying is what they want. They want the bion. Like I'm sure you haven't heard it. Like this gentleman Peter Thiel, he was being interviewed. He was talking about the human race and the human species. He was being asked about it, and he was being asked if he thinks that humans should like survive into the future. And he was humming and hawing about it. He didn't really know how to answer that question, which for me is kind of alarming because this guy is he's a billionaire and whatever. But
mhm.
past that, he was talking about how he wants people to be able to not even like change their hearts, replace like you're talking about limbs. He's thinking about hearts and organs and being able to switch all these things out and be pretty much until you're at the point where you are very much meshed with machine. And Elon Musk actually has a timeline of 2028 to 2030 of actually having his Neuralink invention be able to support bionic limbs. So somebody who's paralyzed, who has Neuralink, will be able to get rid of those limbs or possibly reanimate them. But they are working on bionic limbs right now. That is something.
Well, I would love to see that. I have a niece who is 27 years old who's been paralyzed from the waist down in a wheelchair since she was 13. I would love to see that kind of technology.
Well, see, that's the
That
thing
would
for
be
people who
wonderful.
need
But
it. If people who need it, I think
yeah,
it's wonderful. When I see Neuralink and it's like a guy who's quadriplegic and he can't move and he's using it, and now he can use the computer faster and he can, one guy, he lost his voice. He has like a bunch of kids and he lost his voice. So with the Neuralink and with AI dubbing of his voice, he was able to bring his voice back, what he actually
mm,
sounded like. And I think that's beautiful. But the thing is, when you're talking about like all these people are going to start to use it whether or not they need it. Like there's going to be a guy who's going to say, well, my knee hurts. So yeah, if you can take off the leg, you're going to give me a new one. It's going to work. Do it. There's many people who will, there's
oh
people
yeah,
of all types who are ready to do some stuff. There's a guy who will definitely do that. He'll be like, swap out my eyes if you can, swap out everything. Like, let's go. Let's see
yeah,
how far you can take it. Right. So
yeah.
it's going to be an
I
interesting
think
world.
that I think the research could be better spent on trying to cure first. Let's try to cure, childhood cancer.
That would be
Little
really cool.
babies from dying from brain tumors and other types of cancer, and then worry about should we live forever. Let's just
Yeah.
let people live, period.
Yeah.
Live into adulthood.
Yeah, that's a much better way of looking at it. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I just wanted to have your take on that because you see the, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like you see the good side of death, like you see it in
Yeah,
a much better light than most people do.
for sure.
So I figured I'd ask you that question to see where you're at with it. But I mean, most people aren't liking it, but there's millions of people who are going to like it. They're going to move forward with it, but we'll see. We'll see how it all happens. Now, I want to ask you, are you good for time?
I do need to go pretty soon.
Okay.
I got a
So,
dog in the house that probably needs to get let out
oh no.
eventually.
Okay. So I wanted to ask you, and I guess this is for your perspective and also other people's perspective, seeing this many people pass away, seeing this whole process over and over again, how has this shifted your perspective on life? Not just death, because you've seen a lot of death. How has this shifted your perspective on life?
Well, like I said, it makes me, enjoy enjoy things more, find joy wherever I can. Um, appreciate the beauty around me and not sweat the small stuff as much.
Yeah,
It just helps me to really appreciate everything instead of looking back and going, dang, I wish I would have done that, to appreciate it in the moment that it's happening.
true, true. And then when it comes to preparing for what you call, I saw in the book, a good death,
Mm.
it's I know we went over, figuring out what you want done, just, not even just as you're passing, but like, the whole way through as you're, God forbid, getting terminally ill or anything. It's that preparing that. What else would you suggest to us in order to become more accepting and become more prepared for this inevitable feat we're all going to go through?
Talk about it, like read about it, talk about it, watch the video. There are death cafes you can go to now. There are board games and card games that you can get. I think that's really one of the key things is to getting to acceptance is to be willing to explore the topic like we are doing right now today on your podcast.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people in the death space right now, a lot who are doing podcasts, movies, books, games, meetings, clubs. It's out there, and be willing to go, to be in your discomfort, like to allow yourself to be uncomfortable and to
Yeah.
talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And learn about it and learn about it. The more you know about it, it's fascinating. Try to approach it with wonder instead of fear, because it really is fascinating. When I started working as a hospice nurse, that is one of the things that really struck me was how our bodies know how to die and how similar death is for everybody who goes through a natural dying process. It was like, wow, that person had that kind of a breathing pattern at the end of life, and so did that one. Or another phenomena that happens is end of life rally, where somebody is dying and you think they're going to die any minute, and then they wake up and they're like, hey, let's play some cards, and can you get me a snack? I'm feeling kind of hungry. And you're like, what? He's better. Oh my God, he's cured. It's a miracle. And then less than 24 hours later, they're dying again. And then a week after that, they're dead. Like that is a phenomenon that happens in 4 out of 10 dying people, and mind blowing, fascinating, and happens a lot, And so those types of things are, they were just like, to me, is something that I think that people should know about and understand, because it helps you to realize how normal it all is.
Yeah.
How normal it is.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Thank you so much for this conversation. Here, I was pulling up your book a second ago. This is the book, guys, Influencing Death. I'm halfway. I've listened through the whole thing, but actually reading it, I'm halfway through. I made sure, like, I was speed reading it, or speed listening to it a few times before the interview, like the past week. I've just been, but honestly, it's been hard for me because it's a hard subject for me to hear about, but the thing about this book is the first like 120 pages, it's just about how wild this lady is. It's just about this wild life that you're leading. So it's a really cool story. Really, really cool story. I like how open you were with everything. How you were so open with having a kid and going through these terrible roommates that you were having and these terrible friends and making these bad decisions and going through all the hardships you went through, whether it was in relationships or friends and with kids, with your kid. It's just, yeah, it's a really, really cool story. So I love it. I love it myself. Here, let's make sure to pull up the other stuff here, because you got the podcast as well. I like listening to this podcast, honestly. I was listening to a little bit of it with you and your friend talking. You guys still doing that or what?
We're on pause right now. So we had 2 seasons out, but we're on pause because we're actually writing a book together.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, cool. Our book is going to be Death Happens, an insider's guide to dying. And there's going to be a lot of kind of tongue in cheek, bringing our experience. She's been a hospice social worker for, I think 10 years or something like that. And so we're bringing our experience together to educate, but also, to do it in a way that brings levity to it and makes it more digestible.
Cool. Yeah, I really,
and my website has a lot of resources for people on there too. Like there's links to then HPCO, and that's the National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization. It's got a guide to, yeah, how to choose a hospice, how to interview a hospice, because it is a choice that you get to make. You don't have to go
Mhm.
with one that you've been referred to. And then I also have a new page on there that is tips for hospice nurses. So my best tips for being a successful hospice nurse, because now since I've been on social media, a lot of people are interested in working in the death field and asking me, how do I become a hospice nurse? And
Yeah. Yeah, it looks like you got it all laid out, predicting death. Yeah, vital signs. Wow. This would be vital for anybody to read through, I think. I mean, just in general, because you are a part of that. Even if you do hire someone hospice, you still do have to be a part of that process just as much. So,
more so, because hospice doesn't do 24/7 care. We're
uh,
there to teach the family and to support, but the family, they're the caregivers. So we are teaching people how to care for their person. And, we still do skilled things like put in catheters and wound care and things like that. But the family is the primary caregiver, and we are teaching them, what to expect and how to care for their dying person. So yeah, hospice is not a place, it's a program. There are hospice care centers, and sometimes people die in boarding homes or skilled nursing facilities where the family doesn't have to be the caregiver. But the majority of hospice patients are going to die in their own home with family as caregivers.
true, true. Wow. Here, let me also just pull up the very last thing here. Penny, you should be in my searches now. Now you're all over my searches. Any hospice. Just so people know about the YouTube. And obviously, all this will be in the description as well. But I just want them to be able to see who you are on YouTube. You guys can go check it out. There's a bunch of videos there. And you're also on TikTok by the same name. Is it the same as the YouTube?
Yes.
What do they
Yeah.
search there?
Yeah. TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, Hospice Nurse Penny everywhere.
Wow, amazing, amazing. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to end this right now, and you just stay with me for a second. But thank you
Okay.
so much, and for everybody watching, this was one of the brighter episodes. Yeah, we had a good time here.
Yeah, you didn't cry. You said you were
I
going to cry, and you never
I
cried.
I thought I was going there because if I'm talking about if I'm talking about my friend that passed or my dad, I figured that might come up even just thinking
Yeah.
about it. But I guess I'm getting better with that whole thing. But guys, definitely take this seriously. Start looking into it. You don't have to get all morbid about it, but definitely start taking it seriously and start looking at it a lot better. I don't think it's the end. I think it's the beginning of something great, and we just don't know what that is yet.